My name is Claire, and I want to tell you about the day I realized my parents had written me out of their lives long before they ever said the words out loud. It started with a wedding. Not mine. My brother's. See, while I was lying in a hospital bed waiting for test results that would change everything, my parents spent $350,000 on Derek's wedding weekend. Open bar for 3 days, a private vineyard in Napa, fireworks over the water, a string quartet flown in from New York. And when I called my mother from that hospital room, she told me she was too busy coordinating the florist to talk. That wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was that I wasn't surprised, because that's how it had always been. Derek was the future. I was just the daughter they kept forgetting to account for. They gave him a down payment on his first house at 22. They co-signed his business loan twice. They flew across the country for every milestone of his life and sent me a card for mine. And when I needed them most, when the doctor sat down next to me and used the word surgery and the number $140,000 in the same sentence, my father asked me how soon I could get off the phone because they had rehearsal dinner seating charts to finalize. Now they're the ones calling me. Now the accounts are frozen and the house is in foreclosure and Derek's business collapsed under the weight of loans they guaranteed with money they never actually had. Now my mother's voice goes soft and careful when she speaks to me, like I'm something fragile she's finally decided is worth handling gently. But I know the difference between love and desperation. I learned it the hard way in a hospital room in Columbus, Ohio at 29 years old, with no insurance, no savings, and no one coming. How do you rebuild a life when the people who were supposed to be your foundation were the ones who cracked it? How do you protect yourself from the grief of parents who are still alive but never really showed up? And what do you do when the family that left you to drown comes back asking you to be their life raft? I was working the closing shift at the architecture firm when my phone buzzed on the desk beside my laptop. It was a number from the school. My stomach dropped before I even answered. Miss Carter? This is the front office at Millview Elementary. Your daughter Lily has been sent to the nurse. She's having trouble breathing. Her lips have a little color to them that we're not used to seeing. I grabbed my coat and keys in the same motion. Lily was 7. She'd had a mild heart murmur since birth, something the pediatrician monitored but said was manageable. Nothing urgent, but that word manageable has a way of shifting without warning. At the ER, a cardiologist I'd never met before explained it to me in the kind of measured, practiced tone that told me she'd delivered news like this before. Lily's condition had progressed. There was a structural issue that had gone undetected in the earlier scans. She would need open heart surgery. Not in a few months. Soon. Within 2 weeks ideally. The procedure itself, combined with the required post-operative monitoring and the specialized surgical team, would cost $140,000. I didn't have insurance. I'd lost it 4 months earlier when I transitioned from full-time to contract work to take on a better-paying freelance project. The new policy hadn't kicked in yet. It was the worst timing of my life, and it had been entirely ordinary paperwork until that exact moment. I sat in the hallway outside Lily's room with my back against the wall and my phone face down on the floor beside me. I already knew what I had to do. I already knew how it was going to go. But she was 7 years old and her name was Lily and I had absolutely no other choice. My mother answered on the second ring. There was music in the background, something live, something expensive. Mom, I said, I need to talk to you. It's about Lily. She's in the hospital. Claire, honey, she said. And I could hear the smile still in her voice from whatever conversation she'd just been pulled from. We're right in the middle of the welcome dinner. Derek and Sasha just did their first toast. Can this wait until tomorrow? She needs surgery, I said. Open heart. The bill is $140,000 and I don't have coverage right now. I need help. The music didn't stop. I could still hear glasses and laughter and someone giving a speech about love and forever. My mother lowered her voice. How much did you say? I repeated the number. There was a pause. Then she exhaled slowly, the way she did when she was about to explain something to me she considered obvious. Claire, we've already put so much into this weekend. You know what the venue alone cost. We've been planning this for over a year. We can't just pull money out of thin air. Your father and I aren't made of it. I said nothing. I waited for her to hear herself. She didn't. I'll call you Sunday, she said. After the brunch. We can sit down and figure something out together." I hung up. I sat in that hallway for a long time. At some point, a nurse brought me a cup of water I didn't drink. I kept thinking about something my mother had said to me years ago when I was in college and asked why Derek's tuition was fully funded, but mine had come with a repayment clause attached to it. She'd looked at me with that patient, slightly exhausted expression she reserved for conversations she found tiresome and said, "Derek has a plan, Claire. You're still figuring it out. You've always been the one who needs more time." I was 20 years old and I believed her. I spent years thinking the gap between Derek and me was something I'd caused by being insufficiently certain, insufficiently ambitious, insufficiently easy to invest in. It took me until that hospital hallway, 39 months after Lily was born, to understand that the gap had been constructed deliberately and I was never supposed to notice. I called my father next. He answered on the first ring, which surprised me. He knew. My mother had already texted him. His voice was flat in a way that felt prepared. "Claire." He used my name the way a closing argument uses evidence. "I've seen the message from your mother. Here's what I want you to understand. We have significant financial commitments around this wedding weekend, and restructuring anything right now would cause consequences that affect more than just us." That's the language he used. Restructuring. Consequences. He was talking about his grandchild's heart. I asked him directly, "Can you help me or not?" He paused. "Not right now, no. But I want you to know, and I mean this, that if you need to look at options, there are medical financing programs. Some hospitals have charity care. I can send you some links." I said okay. Then I hung up, and I went back into Lily's room, and I held her hand while she slept, and I did not let myself cry because she could not wake up to see that. That night, in the family waiting room, I found myself scrolling through my email archives out of pure sleepless habit, and I found something I hadn't looked at in years. A forwarded document from my Aunt Patricia, my father's older sister, who had passed away when I was in my mid-20s. She'd sent it to me 3 weeks before she died with a subject line that read, "Just in case you ever need this." I'd never opened it. I opened it now. It was a copy of my grandparents' estate distribution memo. My grandparents had died within a year of each other when I was in high school. I remembered the estate being settled quietly. I remembered not asking questions because no one invited them. The memo outlined the distribution of a trust valued at approximately $480,000. My name appeared once. The line next to it read, "As per instruction of primary trustees, Claire's portion has been redirected to the Family General Fund per updated directive dated 4 years before their deaths." There was a handwritten note attached in my Aunt Patricia's writing. She'd written, "Your parents were the primary trustees. This was their decision, not your grandparents'. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought it might destroy things. I realize now that some things are already destroyed and you deserve to know." I read it 3 times. Then I sat very still in that plastic waiting room chair and let myself understand what it meant. My parents had quietly redirected my share of my grandparents' estate. My grandfather, who used to call me his little architect, who'd saved a copy of every drawing I ever made. My grandmother, who taught me how to make her pie crust from memory, who told me once that I had the most steady hands in the family. They had left something for me, and my parents had taken it, and then looked me in the eye for years. I didn't feel rage right away. What I felt first was something much quieter and much harder to name, like when a bruise finally surfaces days after the impact, like realizing the fall happened long before you hit the ground. By morning, I had done what I could. I sold my car to my neighbor for below market value because she paid cash and I needed it by noon. I called my firm and negotiated a partial advance on the freelance contract. I emptied the savings account I'd been building for Lily's future education. I was still $62,000 short. Then my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't spoken aloud in 2 years. Marcus Webb. We'd been close in grad school, the kind of close that doesn't have a clean category. He'd moved to Seattle and started a tech company, and I'd lost track of him in the way that life accelerates and friendships compress. His message said, "I saw something online. Someone shared a post about a little girl in Columbus who needs heart surgery. The photo looked like yours. Is that Lily? Tell me what's happening." I called him. He picked up before the first ring finished. I told him everything. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm sending something to the hospital billing office directly right now. Don't argue with me. You can pay me back with interest in 40 years when we're both retired, and this is just a story we tell at dinner." He wired $30,000 that afternoon. No conditions, no documentation requests, no lengthy conversation about what it meant or what I owed. Just a transaction notification and a text that said, "I called the billing coordinator. She knows more is coming. We're not done yet." He started a fundraiser that evening. He wrote it himself and posted it from his personal profile, which had a following from his company's early days. Within 12 hours, Lily's surgery was fully funded. The donations came in pieces, some from people I knew, most from strangers who left small notes. A woman from Michigan who wrote, "My daughter had the same surgery at 8. She just turned 24. A man from Texas who sent $500 and wrote only, "No child should wait." People who had nothing to gain and gave anyway. I sat beside Lily's bed and read every name on that list, and something in my chest that had been clenched since the hallway began to loosen. It lasted 4 days before my brother called. He didn't ask about Lily. He said hello, and then he said, "I heard there's been some online attention around your situation, and I just want to make sure everyone understands that the family has been doing what we can." I said the family has not been doing what it can, Derek. He said, "Look, it's not fair to make this public in a way that reflects badly on all of us. Mom and Dad are getting calls. People are making assumptions." I said, "People are making assumptions." He said, "Claire, I'm trying to help you here." I said, "No, you're not," and I hung up. 2 days later, the fundraiser post was flooded with new comments. Most of them skeptical, some of them hostile. "Why doesn't she have insurance for her kid? Seems convenient, where's the father?" I'd seen this pattern before, not personally, but I recognized it. Comments that specific don't come from nowhere. They arrive in clusters when someone coordinates them. That evening, a friend of mine in Cincinnati texted me a screenshot. It was a private message thread forwarded to her by someone who'd been in a group chat with Derek's wife, Sasha. In it, Sasha had written to 3 or 4 people, "Claire always does this. Creates chaos, makes herself the victim, gets attention. Don't donate. It's not what it looks like." She hadn't tagged me. She hadn't needed to. The people in that group chat had mutual connections to the fundraiser. The timing was not coincidental. The next morning, I lost a project. I'd been working with a nonprofit in Columbus for 8 months designing a new community center. Their executive director sent me an email that was professional and distant in the way that emails are when someone has been advised to document a termination. "Due to the current online conversation surrounding your personal situation, we feel it's best to pause our engagement. We wish you well." I read the email in the hospital cafeteria. I set down my coffee. I didn't move for a while. They weren't just trying to quiet me, they were trying to make silence feel like the only survivable option. I spent the next week running 2 tracks in parallel. During the day I was at the hospital, I learned Lily's nurse's schedule. I learned which doctor preferred to be briefed by chart and which preferred a conversation. I helped Lily do her homework in bed with a lap desk Marcus had shipped to the hospital because it had little stars on it, and she'd mentioned she liked stars. At night, after she was asleep, I worked. I responded to every inaccurate comment with a single factual correction and a link to the hospital's verification of Lily's case. I documented every piece of coordination between the hostile comments and Sasha's group chat. I had a friend who worked in digital communications review everything for me, and then I waited. The surgery happened on a Tuesday morning. I sat in the waiting room for 4 hours and 40 minutes. I counted the tiles on the ceiling. I made a list of every person who had sent money or a message, intending to thank each of them individually. I drank 4 cups of bad coffee. When the surgeon came out and told me it had gone well, that Lily was stable, and asking for her purple blanket, I pressed my hand flat against my sternum like I was checking that my own heart was still in place. She was in recovery for 9 days. On the 5th day, she started drawing again. Wobbly crayon people on the backs of the meal request forms. She drew me with a hard hat because she knew I was an architect. She drew Marcus with a phone because she'd spoken to him twice on video call, and both times he'd been in his office. She drew a woman with a big smile she labeled Miss Donnie, who was her night nurse, and had a laugh that carried down the hallway. She did not draw her grandparents. On the 8th day, my mother called. I looked at the name on the screen for a long moment. I answered. Her voice was different this time, no music in the background, No rehearsal dinner energy, just quiet and something underneath the quiet that I'd waited my whole life to hear her have to navigate. "Claire," she said, "your father and I have been talking. Things have changed for us financially. Derek's business had some problems. There are some loans that we guaranteed. The house may be at risk. We were hoping that maybe with the fundraiser and everything, you might have some resources that could help us stay afloat while we sort this out." I thought about my grandmother's pie crust. I thought about my grandfather's drawings saved in a box. I thought about a trust fund quietly redirected while I was in high school paying attention to other things because no one told me there was something to pay attention to. I said, "You watched your granddaughter wait for surgery for days. You didn't come. You didn't send anything. You called me after my brother tried to tank the fundraiser that paid for her to survive. And now you're asking me for help." She started to say something. I kept going. "I have the estate memo, Mom. The one from Grandma and Grandpa's trust. Aunt Patricia kept a copy. I know what the trustees decided, and I know who the trustees were." The silence on the other end had a specific texture. It was the silence of someone recalculating. "I'm not going to help you," I said. "Not because I don't have something I could offer, and not because I'm trying to punish you. I'm not helping you because you have never once treated my emergencies as real emergencies. And I have spent too many years performing the role of the grateful daughter to earn basic decency that should have just been given." "We're done," I said, not angrily, just clearly, like reading a coordinate off a map. I hung up. I sat in the quiet of Lily's room for a while, listening to her breathe. Steady and even. Her small chest rising and falling like a tide that had found its rhythm. I thought about the comment from the fundraiser, the one from the Michigan woman whose daughter had the same surgery and was now 24. I thought about that daughter growing up, not knowing how close it had been. Probably, not knowing all the paperwork and the phone calls and the middle-of-the-night panic that preceded her ordinary Tuesday morning. How the ordinary Tuesday mornings are built on all the things that held, all the people who showed up. 3 days after Lily was discharged, Marcus flew in from Seattle. He brought a carry-on-sized bag of things Lily had mentioned in passing during their video calls. A specific puzzle she'd said looked interesting, the book she'd wanted, a small succulent in a pot painted to look like an owl. He slept on my couch for 5 days and did the grocery shopping and fixed the drawer in the kitchen that had been stuck since I moved in. He didn't ask for anything, and he didn't make the visit feel significant, which somehow made it more significant than anything. On the second evening he was there, after Lily was asleep, we sat on the front steps with takeout containers between us. The street was quiet. The air had that particular quality it gets in late October in Ohio. Cold enough to feel present, not cold enough to drive you inside. I told him about the estate memo. I told him about the redirected trust. I said it out loud for the first time to another person, and it felt different out loud than it had in my head. More solid, more finished somehow, like naming a thing fully seals its edges. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "What do you want to do with it? Not legally, not publicly. What do you want to do with the knowledge of it?" I thought about it. Then I said, "I want to let it be true and not have it own me." He nodded. "That sounds exactly right," he said. 2 weeks later, I sent a single email to my parents and to Derek. I attached the estate memo and a legal summary I had drawn up with the help of a family attorney. I outlined what had been redirected, the approximate current value accounting for decades of growth, and noted that I was aware of my options. I told them I was not pursuing legal action at this time. I told them I was not interested in a relationship at this time. I told them that if they chose to move forward with any coordinated effort to damage my professional reputation, I would revisit the first decision. I did not ask for a reply. I didn't need one. My father's assistant called the following morning requesting a call. I didn't take it. The response that actually came was the absence of one. The coordinated comments stopped. Sasha's group chat went quiet, or at least its effects did. Derek posted a vague caption about family being complicated and then deleted it within a few hours. My mother sent me a card, a physical one, with a handwritten note that said simply, "I hope Lily is getting stronger every day." I put it in a drawer. It was the most honest thing she'd ever sent me, I thought. No performance to it, just a small, honest sentence that said nothing and meant more than it wanted to. Lily started back at school 6 weeks after the surgery. She wore the purple backpack she'd been asking for since August and carried her lunch in a bag with owls on it. Coordinated, she was very clear, with the succulent on her bookshelf. On her first morning back, she stood at the door with her hand on the strap of the backpack and looked at me with the specific gravity of a 7-year-old who has recently been through something and come out the other side of it. "Ready," she said. Not a question. I brushed her hair back from her face. I said, "Yeah, me too." There's a version of this story where I spend a lot of time on what my family lost. On Derek's business collapsing and the loans defaulting and the Napa vineyard wedding that turned out to be financed with money that didn't actually exist. On my parents navigating foreclosure. On Sasha's Instagram getting quieter and quieter until eventually it just stopped. None of that is something I gloated over. I didn't screenshot the news or forward the updates. I heard things through people who knew people, and I let the information pass through me without holding it. Because here's what I learned in that hospital hallway. The grief of a family that fails you doesn't end when they face consequences. It just shifts. You grieve the version of them you needed them to be. You grieve every holiday where you smiled carefully and every phone call where you edited yourself down to something they could tolerate. You grieve the grandmother whose estate you were supposed to share, and the grandfather whose drawings you were supposed to inherit, and the birthday money that went somewhere else. That grief has its own timeline, and it doesn't care about anyone's foreclosure. What helped was not the exposure or the legal summary or even the fundraiser, as essential as all of those were. What helped was Marcus on my front steps asking what I wanted, not what I was entitled to, not what was fair, but what I wanted. What helped was Lily's nurse, Miss Donnie, laughing down the hallway at 10 o'clock at night. What helped was a woman in Michigan who told me her daughter was 24 now and had a good life, who didn't need to say anything else. I still work in architecture. The nonprofit project was eventually rebooted with a different project manager, and they reached back out 8 months later. I took the contract. I also took on a pro bono project designing a pediatric cardiac recovery wing for a hospital 20 minutes from where I live. I started it thinking of Lily and finished it thinking of all the other kids and all the other parents and all the other hallways, counting ceiling tiles and making lists and waiting for the surgeon to walk through the door. Marcus and I talk every Sunday now, not because we scheduled it, just because it became the thing that happened at Sunday mornings. He still teases me about the 40-year payback timeline. I let him. Lily is doing well. Her follow-up scans are clear. She asked me recently why she doesn't see Grandma and Grandpa anymore, and I told her the truth in the way you tell a 7-year-old truth, which is carefully and without performance. Sometimes, I said, the people who are supposed to be family don't know how to act like it, and when that happens, you have to protect yourself and the people you love. She thought about it for a second. She said, like, how you told me to walk away from someone at school who was being mean even though we used to be friends? Exactly like that, I said. She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her puzzle. I used to think strength was about not breaking. Now I think it's about knowing what to rebuild and what to leave in the rubble. My parents raised me to be grateful for the scraps. What I am instead is clear. Clear about who showed up and who didn't. Clear about what I'm willing to carry forward and what I'm not. Clear, finally, about the difference between family by blood and family by choice, and about which one actually stays. To anyone watching this who has ever been the one in the family that gets passed over, looked through, quietly written out of documents you didn't know existed, I see you. It is not in your head, and it did not happen because you were too independent or too sensitive or too much of any of the things they used as reasons. It happened because some people treat love as a resource to be allocated, not a commitment to be kept. And the beautiful, hard, true thing is that once you know that, really know it, you can stop waiting for an allocation that was never coming and start building something that was always yours to build. Drop a 1 in the comments if any part of this hit close to home. If you know someone who's been fighting alone in their own version of this hallway, share this with them. And if you're new here, subscribe, because the stories we tell are the ones that don't get told enough. I'll see you in the next one. There's something I've come to understand about the way life balances itself out, not through luck, not through punishment handed down from somewhere above, but through the simple, steady weight of choices made and unmade over time. What you choose to protect reveals what you actually value. And eventually, the gap between what you claim to value and what you actually protect becomes impossible to hide. My parents chose a wedding over a child's heartbeat, not because they were monsters, but because they had spent decades practicing a quieter kind of harm. The harm of consistent exclusion, of treating one child's needs as optional and another's as essential. That practice didn't start with the phone call I made from the hospital. It started years before, in a trust quietly redirected in a tuition repayment clause attached to my education but not my brother's, in 1,000 small signals I spent years explaining away. The $350,000 wedding was not an aberration. It was the full expression of a pattern that had always been there. And here is what I know about patterns: they don't exempt you from their consequences just because you never named them out loud. What took real intelligence was not the legal summary I sent or the fundraiser that saved Lily's life. Those were tools, necessary ones, but tools. The actual intelligence was learning to read the situation accurately. Not the version of it I wanted to be true, not the version that let me keep hoping for a different outcome, but the version that was actually in front of me. That kind of clarity is hard. It requires you to stop negotiating with evidence. It requires you to let the pattern mean what the pattern means. And the courage in this story, the part I'm most certain of, was not the live email, not the documented evidence, not the moment I said we are done and meant it. The real courage was the 4-hour wait outside Lily's surgery when I had no guarantee of anything and I chose to stay steady anyway. The courage was selling my car in a parking lot and calling in every professional favor I had and accepting help from Marcus without shrinking from it. Courage is not the dramatic moment. Courage is every ordinary hour you hold the line when the outcome is still unknown. What Claire's story teaches, what I hope carries past this video and into whatever you're carrying right now, is that integrity compounds the same way harm does. Every time you show up honestly, every time you refuse to become what was done to you, every time you extend real help without strings attached the way Marcus did, and the woman from Michigan did, and Miss Donnie did, without even knowing she was doing it, you are building something. It accrues. It becomes the life that holds when pressure is applied. The people who treated kindness as a limited resource to be rationed ran out. The people who gave without calculation still have everything that matters. That is not a coincidence. That is cause and effect, lived out in real time in a hospital in Columbus, Ohio, over the course of one terrible and clarifying year. If you are in your own hallway right now, counting ceiling tiles, I want you to know that the steadiness you are practicing in this moment is not nothing. It is the foundation of what comes next. Keep going.